My name is Ava Reynolds, and at 26, I never imagined my grad school commencement in Seattle would turn into the most satisfying moment of poetic justice. Standing beside my cousin Hailey, dressed in matching robes, should have felt like a celebration of shared achievement. But instead, it became the moment everything changed, the moment years of being overlooked finally flipped on its head. I still hear my aunt and uncle's voices from years ago. When I was 17, Hailey has real potential. Ava's just, well, creative. That one sentence etched itself into my memory. I was told indirectly, but clearly, that I wasn't worth investing in. They chose Hailey, the golden niece, to support through undergrad. Me? I was expected to figure it out on my own. Before I tell you what turned their smug smiles to open-mouthed shock at graduation, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to hit like if you've ever had to carve your own path while someone else got the easy road. I grew up in a modest town outside Portland, Oregon, where extended family lived close and opinions traveled fast. Our house was cozy, nothing extravagant, but enough. My mom, Beth, worked nights as a nurse, and my dad, Tom, was a warehouse manager. They did what they could, but we all knew my Aunt Laura and Uncle Scott had money. And they made sure everyone knew it. Their daughter, Hailey, was 2 years younger, but always held up as the example I could never match. Pretty, polished, and perfect at piano recitals. My wins were invisible next to her glow. I remember birthdays where Hailey got a new iPad and I got a grocery store cake with generic frosting. You're older, you understand. My mom would say gently, as if being invisible was maturity. When I won the statewide essay contest my junior year, no one in the family group chat even mentioned it. But when Hailey got a B+ in chemistry, full parade. The one person who never let me feel small was my Grandpa Joe. A retired librarian with a soft spot for underdogs, he would sit beside me in his cluttered garage and say, "Ava, don't worry about applause now. Focus on doing something they'll never forget." He gave me my first copy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and from then on, I was hooked on business, finance, and independence. I put myself through college with scholarships and side hustles. By 24, I'd launched a budgeting app that quietly grew a cult following among freelancers. And by 25, it had been acquired by a major fintech company. I didn't say anything to my extended family. Not until graduation day. When I was invited to speak at the ceremony as a distinguished alum, the look on Aunt Laura's face, when I walked across the stage, name booming from the speakers, was worth everything. So no, I didn't get their support. But I got something better. I got to prove them wrong. During my junior year of undergrad, I took a part-time job at a local cafe in Capitol Hill, pulling espresso shots and sweeping up crumbs after closing just to save a little money. Something deep down told me I'd have to rely on myself. I worked nearly 20 hours a week, juggling early morning shifts with late-night study sessions. Still, I kept a 4.0 GPA, driven by a fire I couldn't quite name back then. Maybe it was the quiet desperation to be seen. Meanwhile, Hailey joined the student government and instantly became the poster child of our high school. My aunt and uncle never missed a single campaign speech or election result. Each time she advanced, they threw her dinner parties, complete with decorations and catered meals. By the time senior year arrived, the competition between us felt inevitable. Though we were technically cousins, Hailey had skipped a grade, so we ended up graduating the same year. Both of us applied to Rainier University, the top private college in Washington state, known for its elite business and public policy programs. Somehow, miraculously, we both got in. I still remember that day. I was sitting on the bus, heading home from work, when I got the email. My hands were shaking as I opened the message. "Congratulations, Ava, I got in. Full acceptance into the School of Business, my first choice." That night at dinner, I could hardly contain my excitement. "I got accepted," I blurted out. "Rainier. Business program." My dad looked up from his meatloaf, offered a small nod, and said, "Nice work, honey." Then went back to eating. 10 minutes later, Hailey walked into the house, literally screaming, "I got in. Rainier's policy track." It was like someone flipped a switch. My aunt shrieked. My uncle stood and hugged her. Champagne was popped from the fridge. Plates were abandoned, phones whipped out for photos. "You were born for this," Aunt Laura beamed at her. No one mentioned my acceptance again that night. 2 weeks later, everything broke. We were gathered for Sunday dinner, extended family included. That's when Uncle Scott cleared his throat and said, "We need to talk about college expenses." He looked directly at Hailey. "We've been saving since you were born. Rainier isn't cheap, but don't worry, we've got everything covered. Focus on your studies." Hailey just smiled like she expected it. I turned to my parents. "What about me?" The room went still. My mom looked down. My dad sighed. "Ava," he said, "we never really planned for this. You've always been so independent. We just thought you'd find a way." "But I got in too," I said, barely above a whisper. Uncle Scott shrugged. "You're smart, Ava, but Hailey's going places. We had to choose." Then he said the words I'll never forget. "She earned it. Well, you didn't in the same way." It shattered me. All those years of quietly succeeding, perfect grades, endless hours, award-winning business plans, meant nothing. Not to them. I wasn't worth the investment. That night, I cried for the last time over their approval. And then I started building something they'd never be able to ignore. The next morning, puffy-eyed and hollow, I stood in the kitchen while my dad read the paper and my mom sipped her coffee. I hadn't slept. The betrayal was still fresh, raw in my throat. "How could you save for Hailey's college but not mine?" I asked, my voice tight, wavering despite my effort to sound steady. My mom didn't look up. She stirred her coffee with exaggerated calm. "Ava, it's not that simple," she said. "We had to make practical choices. There were only so many resources." "But I have better grades than Hailey," I shot back. "I've worked part-time since sophomore year. I kept a perfect GPA. How is that not dedication?" Dad snapped his newspaper shut like a gavel falling. "Your cousin's always taken her studies seriously. You've always had other distractions. That job of yours. Your ideas," he added, waving his hand dismissively. "Business plans? Apps? Risky at best." "You never even asked about my plans," I said softly, barely audible. My mom finally met my eyes. "We'll help you apply for loans," she offered. "A lot of students finance college themselves. It's common." That was the end of it. They had made their decision long before I ever got that acceptance letter. In their eyes, I was less stable, less promising, less worthy of belief. That weekend, I got in my car and drove the 2 hours to Whidbey Island, where Grandpa Joe lived in a weathered cottage near the shore. He was the only person whose support had never wavered. The minute he opened the door and saw my face, he pulled me into a hug without a word. Later, at the kitchen table, I told him everything. About Rainier. About Hailey. About the savings account that had my name missing from it. He listened, nodding quietly, his lined hands folded around mine. "My brilliant Ava," he said when I finished, wiping my tears with his sleeve. "This pain? This is going to be your fuel. Your parents can't see it, but you've got something they don't understand. Fire. You'll outwork every single person in that lecture hall. Mark my words." He didn't have money to give. His pension barely kept his utilities running. But what he gave me was better, unwavering belief. "Promise me you'll go anyway," he said firmly. "Don't let their blind spots limit your future." That night, I made my decision. I would attend Rainier. I'd fund it myself. I'd prove them wrong with every exam, every paycheck, every sleepless night. The next morning, I started researching like my life depended on it. Grants. Scholarships. Work study. Loans. My guidance counselor, Ms. Patel, stayed late with me 3 days a week. "I've rarely seen a student this driven," she said, helping me hit submit on my 28th scholarship application. I secured several small awards. Still not enough. But with federal loans and Grandpa co-signing a private one, I scraped together the money for freshman year. Housing? Hailey got a dorm suite paid by our family. I found a cramped basement apartment 40 minutes from campus with 2 roommates I met online. I packed my things in beat-up suitcases I got from Goodwill. No shopping trip. No new laptop. No send-off. Just grit and a quiet promise to myself. This wasn't the end. It was my beginning. The night before I left for Rainier, My mom hesitantly handed me a set of faded floral twin sheets from the back of a linen closet. "These might fit your bed," she mumbled, not quite meeting my eyes. That was the only acknowledgement that I, too, was leaving for college. Move-in day came with a heavy sky and a heavier heart. My parents loaded up the family SUV with Hailey's color-coded bins, luxury bedding, and crates of brand-new supplies. I trailed behind in my sputtering 2008 Honda Civic, the one that leaked coolant and made an awful rattling noise every time I tapped the brakes. No one offered to check the tires. No one asked if I needed help with the drive. At the campus entrance, they turned toward Hailey's luxury dorm while I peeled off alone toward my rented apartment on the south side of the city, nearly an hour away. As they pulled away, Mom called out, "Good luck, Ava. I hope this all works out for you." The unspoken doubt in her voice rang louder than anything she said. But I didn't need luck. I needed grit. And I had that in abundance. The apartment was rougher than I expected, peeling paint, a broken heater, and plumbing that whined like a haunted kettle. My roommates were strangers, one of whom had already claimed half the fridge and all the hot water. That first night, curled up on a thin mattress I bought from a Craigslist ad, surrounded by city noise and yelling neighbors, I felt everything crash in. Can I really do this? I wondered. 30 hours of work each week. A full course load. Rent due in 3 weeks. What if I can't keep up? What if I fail? Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Grandpa Joe. "My girl, diamonds are made under pressure. You're already gleaming. Keep going." With those words in mind, I wiped my face and pulled out my planner. I mapped out every hour: class, work, study, meals, sleep. No time for parties, no space for error. I would make this work, even if it meant breaking every comfort I'd ever known. The financial aid office became my second home. Ms. Winters, the assistant director, listened intently as I told her my story. "You're taking on a mountain," she said gently. "But I've seen students like you reach the top. Just promise me you'll come here before it gets too much." That promise saved me more than once. The day before classes began, I got a surprise call from Ms. Patel, my high school counselor. She had rallied the business department at my old school to award me an extra $1,000 scholarship. "It's not much," she said, "but we all chipped in. Because we believe in you, Ava." I added the amount to my budget spreadsheet, tears welling. It wasn't about the money, it was about finally being seen. Freshman year came in like a storm. While others explored campus and made new friends, I woke at 5 a.m. for study sessions, opened the cafe at 7, ran to business lectures, then clocked into the bookstore by evening. I got home at midnight, exhausted but moving forward. I read textbooks on the bus, ate lunch while typing essays, played recorded lectures while cleaning espresso machines. Every second counted. Every inch I earned. The contrast between my life and Hailey's couldn't have been sharper. Through her occasional texts and curated social media posts, I caught glimpses of her carefree Rainier experience, sorority formals, study abroad info sessions, and weekends spent back home with Mom's famous lasagna. Meanwhile, I was deciding whether to spend my last $40 on textbooks or groceries. But amid the exhaustion and chaos, something remarkable happened. My business classes weren't just manageable, I was thriving. All those years of budgeting, juggling jobs, and managing real-life pressure had given me a head start. While my classmates were learning about balance sheets for the first time, I was already applying them to my own financial life. Every dollar tracked, every loan payment calculated. One afternoon, Professor Bennett, who taught business ethics, stopped me after class. "Ava, your case study on family resource allocation was exceptional," she said. "The way you tied in real-world decision-making and moral conflict, it shows rare maturity." For the first time, my hardship wasn't a weakness. It was my strength. My confidence grew, even as my days stayed long and my nights short. And then, just when I thought I'd have to shoulder it all alone, Zoe happened. Zoe, one of my apartment roommates, noticed how often I skipped meals and how late I stayed up with textbooks and half-eaten granola bars. One night, she greeted me at the door with tea already steeping. "You can't keep going like this," she said, handing me a mug. "You'll crash before midterms." When I told her everything, her concern turned to anger. "That's insane. You're doing all this alone." From that moment on, Zoe appointed herself my college family. She'd leave containers of homemade soup or stir-fry in the fridge with sticky notes labeled "For Ava, love." She helped proofread my papers when I could barely keep my eyes open. She made flashcards, shooed away noisy roommates during finals, and reminded me often that I mattered. "My mom always said family is who shows up," she told me. "And sometimes, that's not the people you were born to." Zoe was right. Then, midway through sophomore year, disaster struck. The cafe where I worked cut everyone's hours due to a winter slowdown. My income dropped nearly 40%, rent, food, and tuition became impossible puzzles. For the first time, panic set in. I made a desperate appointment with Ms. Winters in financial aid. After reviewing my grades and records, she offered a lifeline. "Your academic performance qualifies you for an emergency grant," she said. "Also, Professor Bennett recommended you for a research assistant position in the business department. It pays better than the coffee shop, and it's a resume builder." That job changed everything. I started working directly with Professor Bennett on her research into small business resilience during economic downturns, and for the first time, I was being paid to think, not just survive. The research assistant position was more than just a financial lifeline, it was a window into the future I'd always dreamed of. The flexible hours fit around my demanding class schedule, and the intellectual stimulation was a refreshing shift from pulling espresso shots and restocking shelves. More importantly, Professor Bennett took a sincere interest in my potential. "Have you considered entrepreneurship?" she asked one afternoon as we reviewed survey data on small business resilience. "Your thinking around constraint-driven innovation is well beyond your years." That single conversation stirred something deep within me. A seed that had been planted back in high school, when I devoured books from Grandpa Joe's library, finally began to sprout. Using the practical skills from my marketing and digital media classes, I began developing a small online platform, a virtual assistant service tailored to small businesses in Seattle. Late at night, after finishing my research reports and study sessions, I'd sit on the floor of my apartment, building a simple website and crafting personalized service packages. Admin support, email marketing, scheduling, tasks I knew many local entrepreneurs didn't have time for. By the start of junior year, I had secured a handful of loyal clients. The extra income meant I could finally quit the bookstore job. I kept the research assistant role, not for the money, but for the guidance. Professor Bennett's mentorship became the cornerstone of my development. For the first time since high school, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was building. In business strategy class, I started raising my hand more, sharing real-world insights. To my surprise, professors started referring students to me for feedback on their business ideas. Some even invited me to sit on student startup panels. Ava Reynolds, the girl who once hid behind textbooks and coffee cups, was becoming a respected voice in the business department. Meanwhile, Hailey and I kept a distant, polite relationship. She'd occasionally invite me to sorority mixers or study groups, but I usually declined. Work and school left no room for Greek life. Our conversations stayed surface level, a reflection of how things had always been. Our parents called Hailey weekly. I heard from them only on birthdays, holidays, or when someone was sick. One Thanksgiving, I couldn't afford the trip home. My mom's text read, "We miss you at dinner, but we understand you're busy with your projects." The ellipses said it all. But their silence only fueled me further. My grades soared Dean's List every semester. I earned multiple departmental awards and even presented my startup journey at a regional business conference. By the end of junior year, my side hustle had evolved into a small digital marketing agency serving clients across Washington. I hired 2 fellow students as part-time associates, turning class theory into real revenue. Then, Professor Bennett nominated me for the Entrepreneurial Excellence Scholarship, a full ride for senior year. "You've earned this, Ava," she said. "Your story is exactly what this program is meant to champion." For the first time in years, I felt the crushing weight of financial anxiety begin to lift. And without even realizing it, my journey was becoming something of a legend among faculty and students alike. As I stayed focused on surviving and thriving, seeds I had quietly planted over years of sacrifice were finally beginning to bloom. When senior year arrived, it did so with a surge of momentum I never could have imagined when I first stepped onto Rainier University's campus in that beat-up old Honda. My digital marketing agency had grown beyond anything I had planned. With 15 steady clients, mostly small businesses from rural and underserved areas, and 4 part-time student assistants, I was no longer just building something for survival. I was building something real. In October, my story was featured in a Seattle-based entrepreneurship magazine, a full-page spread that included quotes from clients and professors. New client inquiries started pouring in. And for the first time, I felt like my professional reputation extended beyond the campus walls. Meanwhile, my academics remained stellar. I had climbed to the top of the business program, something that had seemed like a distant dream just a few years ago. Then, Professor Bennett handed me a glossy brochure. "The National Collegiate Business Innovation Competition is accepting entries," she said. "Grand prize is $50,000 in startup funding and national exposure. I think your agency, especially your niche focus, has a real shot." With her mentorship, I threw myself into the application. I rewrote my business plan from scratch, refined my model, and practiced my pitch with grueling precision. After 3 rounds of judging, I made it to the final round, scheduled for April, just 1 month before graduation. Ironically, while I was soaring, Hailey began to falter. Her senior thesis in political science hit hard. She'd never had to grind, never had to manage more than just her coursework. Years of support and soft landings had left her unprepared for the real pressure of a solo academic endeavor. One rainy Tuesday in November, there was a knock at my apartment door. It was Hailey, red-eyed, clutching her laptop and a stack of research papers. "I'm failing my thesis," she blurted. "Professor Goldstein says my methodology's a mess. If I don't fix it in 3 weeks, I might not graduate." I stared at her. Part of me wanted to feel smug, even vindicated. But another part of me, maybe the part Grandpa Joe had nurtured, knew better. "Come in," I said quietly. "Let's figure it out." Over the next several nights, I helped her rebuild her thesis from the ground up. My research experience with Professor Bennett, all those long hours of analysis and disciplined documentation, became her lifeline. One night, as we took a break, she looked at me and asked, "How do you do all of this?" "The business, the grades, the jobs. I'm drowning with just school." I paused, then told her the truth about the 60-hour weeks, skipped meals, the crushing weight of student loans. "I had no idea," she whispered. "Mom and Dad always said you were fine." "Fine is a moving target," I said. "But I've never stopped aiming." "But why didn't you ever say anything?" Hailey asked one night as we packed up from another marathon thesis session. The question hit me harder than I expected. Would it have changed anything? I said, not bitter, just honest. Would Mom and Dad have suddenly decided I was worth investing in too? She fell silent, eyes lowered. That conversation marked a shift. Something inside Hailey cracked open, and for the first time, she truly saw the inequality that had shaped our lives. Slowly but surely, she became an unexpected ally. She started turning down expensive gifts from our parents. When they offered to pay for a spring break trip, she declined. "Ava's been doing it on her own," she told them. "I want to as well." They didn't understand, but I did. By January, our once awkward study sessions had become something genuine. Hailey's thesis recovered, her attitude matured, and the gap between us started to close, not just in grades, but in empathy. Meanwhile, my own senior project had begun to draw institutional attention. In February, I received an email from Dean Rodriguez, head of the business school, asking me to come by her office. "Ava," she said, smiling across her desk, "your journey here at Rainier has been nothing short of extraordinary. From financing your education alone to building a scalable business, while maintaining academic excellence, you embody exactly what we want our students to aspire to." She leaned forward. "Every year, we choose one student to deliver a short address at graduation. This year, we'd be honored if you represented the business school." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The chance to stand on that stage, in front of my professors, my peers, and especially my parents, felt like more than an honor. It was the culmination of every missed meal, every sleepless night, every dismissed achievement. I'd be honored, I replied. What I didn't know then was that Dean Rodriguez had something else planned, something she wouldn't reveal until the ceremony itself. By April, my focus was on the final round of the National Collegiate Business Innovation Competition. My presentation reflected everything I had learned: how hardship could sharpen innovation, how limitations could fuel creativity, how resilience wasn't a trait, it was a decision. When they announced my name as the national winner, I didn't cry. I smiled and felt something even better than relief: validation. The university newspaper ran a front-page article, complete with a photo of me holding the oversized check. I sent a copy to Grandpa Joe. He called me in tears. "I always knew, Ava," he said. "Now the whole world does." My parents never mentioned the article. Their silence, once a wound, was now just background noise. 2 weeks before graduation, they came to town for Hailey. They rented a large house for the extended family and planned a post-ceremony party. I got a last-minute invitation, barely more than a formality. "We assumed you'd be working," Mom said. "But you're welcome to come." It stung, but not like before. My value wasn't theirs to define anymore. The day before graduation, Grandpa Joe arrived with a soft, wrapped bundle. Inside was a custom graduation stole, embroidered with the words that had carried me through my darkest moments. "Diamonds are made under pressure." He smiled. "Wear it proudly, Ava. You've earned every thread." That evening, during graduation rehearsal, Dean Rodriguez caught my eye and pulled me aside with a knowing smile. "Everything's arranged for tomorrow," she said softly. "Just be prepared for a slightly extended introduction before your speech." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of introduction?" She just winked. "Some surprises are worth waiting for." That night, my extended family gathered at a high-end seafood restaurant overlooking Puget Sound. Tables had been pushed together to form a long banquet setup. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and old family friends filled the room, buzzing with small talk and congratulations. At the center, as usual, sat my parents, holding court, proudly recounting Hailey's post-grad plans to anyone who would listen. "She's thinking of applying to Georgetown's public policy program," Dad beamed. "And Senator Wilkins' office already offered her a summer internship." After a few minutes of this, Uncle Jack, my mom's older brother, cut in. "What about Ava? I heard she won some kind of national competition." My father let out a short chuckle. "Oh, Ava's been busy with her little side projects," he said with a wave of his hand. "Very entrepreneurial, our Ava." The words landed with a thud. Polite. Dismissive. As if I'd been off doing arts and crafts while the real achievers were preparing for Capitol Hill. Across the table, I caught Hailey's eye. She looked uncomfortable, her fork frozen midway to her mouth. After dinner, as we lingered in the restaurant lobby, I saw Grandpa Joe cornering my parents near the coat rack. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his voice was firm, his back straight. My dad's face stiffened. Arms crossed. Defensive. Whatever was said, it didn't matter. Tomorrow, my work would speak for itself. That night, walking back to my apartment, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The years of grinding, of invisibility, of proving myself with no applause, it was all leading to this. Graduation wasn't just a ceremony. It was a declaration. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, as if Seattle had decided to celebrate with me. After breakfast, I dressed in the outfit I'd carefully chosen weeks before, a tailored navy dress under my gown, and sensible but elegant shoes. I wrapped Grandpa Joe's embroidered stole around my shoulders. "Diamonds are made under pressure." Zoe insisted on driving me to campus. "Your chariot awaits, boss lady," she grinned, pulling up with coffee and bagels. No more bus rides today. The university campus pulsed with excitement, families with cameras, balloons tied to strollers, graduates hugging professors. I spotted my peers gathering in clusters, adjusting robes and comparing cords. Then I saw Hailey across the quad, her blonde hair glinting like a beacon. She rushed over, eyes wide, pulling me into a tight hug. "Can you believe we made it?" she whispered. I barely scraped by, and you, she laughed softly, brushing my cap straight. "You built an empire while doing homework." Her voice was filled with awe. And for once, it wasn't just me seeing my worth. Everyone else was about to see it too. "We both made it our own way," I replied, keeping my voice neutral, though a flicker of emotion tugged at my chest. The ceremony coordinator began arranging us alphabetically, which placed Hailey and me side by side in the processional. As we took our places, I saw Dean Rodriguez weaving through the rows of graduates, her expression focused. "Ms. Reynolds," she said warmly, taking me aside. "Just confirming our arrangement. After the conferring of degrees, President Harlow will begin the special recognitions. You'll be called up first for your address." Then she leaned in, lowering her voice. "We've planned a few additional acknowledgments. No spoilers. Just be ready for the spotlight." My heart beat faster, but I nodded. "Understood." As we began filing into the massive auditorium, the familiar strains of pomp and circumstance filled the air. I glimpsed the crowd through the tall windows, thousands of parents, siblings, and friends, their voices humming with excitement. As we marched down the center aisle, I scanned the family section. My eyes landed on my parents, seated near the front in a premium row. Dad wore his navy client meeting suit. Mom had on a floral dress and a wide-brimmed hat that practically announced, "Look at me." Their eyes followed Hailey with glowing pride as she passed a few students ahead of me. Then I saw Grandpa Joe, seated beside them in a quiet blue sweater and slacks, posture straight, his eyes locked on mine. Our gazes met, and he nodded once. Just once. But it held everything: pride, defiance, love. The ceremony unfolded with the usual speeches: future dreams, gratitude, global impact. I half listened, my thoughts occupied with my notes, my heartbeat, the hum beneath my skin. Then came the moment. We rose row by row, crossing the stage to accept our degrees. When my name was called, Ava Reynolds, Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, summa cum laude, I heard a clear whistle pierce the polite applause. "Grandpa Joe." I smiled, shaking the university president's hand as cameras flashed. As I returned to my seat, Hailey caught my eye, giving me a proud thumbs up. When the last graduate was seated, President Harlow stepped to the podium. "Before we conclude, we'd like to recognize several exceptional graduates. First, please welcome Ava Reynolds from the School of Business, who will deliver this year's student address." As I stepped onto the stage, I caught sight of my parents again. For the first time that day, they were staring directly at me, their expressions uncertain, surprised. I took a deep breath and began. For years ago, I arrived at Rainier with nothing but determination and the belief that education should be earned, not handed down. I worked 30 hours a week. I built a business from my dorm. I juggled coursework, clients, debt, and doubt. I spoke of resilience, of how adversity had shaped me. I talked about being underestimated and the quiet fire of proving people wrong, not for vengeance, but for truth. The greatest gift of my education, I said, pausing, wasn't found in a textbook. It was learning how to bet on myself, even when no one else would. It was discovering, I said, my voice steady, that the limitations others place on us don't have to become our own. That each of us has the capacity to rise beyond expectations and define success on our own terms. When I stepped back from the podium, the applause felt like a wave, warm, powerful, and real. President Harlow returned to the microphone, smiling broadly. "Thank you, Ms. Reynolds, for those powerful words," he said. "And now it is my distinct pleasure to present several special recognitions, honors that reflect the excellence Rainier University holds at its core." He paused, glancing down at his notes, letting the moment breathe. "First," he continued, "the faculty of the School of Business has unanimously selected Ava Reynolds as this year's valedictorian, graduating with a perfect 4.0 GPA, while simultaneously launching a business now valued at over 6 figures. A quiet gasp rippled through the crowd. I stood beside the stage, momentarily stunned, not having expected any of this. President Harlow went on, his voice growing stronger. Additionally, Ms. Reynolds is this year's winner of the National Collegiate Business Innovation Competition, bringing national recognition to our entrepreneurship program for the first time in university history. The applause swelled again. I looked out at the crowd, my eyes instinctively finding my family. My parents, still seated in the front row, were staring at me. Their faces had shifted from polite confusion to open-mouthed disbelief. But it wasn't over yet. What many of you may not know, President Harlow said, voice resonating through the auditorium, is that Ms. Reynolds accomplished these achievements while fully self-financing her education, working multiple jobs, and maintaining academic excellence, all without any family financial support. An audible murmur swept through the audience. I saw heads turn. Parents exchanged surprised glances. Some nodded with quiet admiration. In recognition of her extraordinary perseverance, he continued, I am proud to announce that Ms. Reynolds has been offered a full-time position with Alexander Global Consulting, one of the country's top business strategy firms. And her entrepreneurial journey will be featured as next month's cover story in Business Innovation magazine. The auditorium erupted in a standing ovation. And as the sound thundered around me, I turned slowly toward my family. My mother's face had gone pale. My father's jaw was set, his hands stiff on his knees. The realization was dawning on them, and everyone around them, that they had abandoned the daughter now being honored as the university's most outstanding graduate. But beside them, Grandpa Joe was glowing. Though his knees kept him seated, the smile on his face could have lit the sky. And Hailey, my sister, stood clapping wildly, tears streaming freely. President Harlow raised his hand for one final announcement. In honor of Ms. Reynolds' inspiring journey, the University Board has approved the creation of the Ava Reynolds Resilience Scholarship, awarded annually to students who demonstrate remarkable determination in the face of personal hardship. The moment was complete. I hadn't just succeeded despite them, I had succeeded beyond them. As I returned to my seat, Hailey grabbed my hand, squeezing it tight. You are amazing, she whispered, trembling. And they were so wrong about you. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of applause, speeches, and tearful farewells. When it finally ended, the graduates spilled out onto the lawn, scattering like confetti to find their families among the buzzing crowd. I spotted my parents standing stiffly beside Grandpa Joe, their usual confident posture replaced by an uneasy stillness. My mother clutched her purse like a lifeline, while my father looked as if he were waiting for a meeting he hadn't prepared for. A few professors and classmates stopped me on the way to offer their congratulations. Professor Bennett hugged me tightly, whispering, "You changed how people see what success looks like here." The delay gave me a moment to steady myself. When I finally approached my family, my father put on a strained smile and forced a chuckle. "Well, this was quite the surprise," he said, his voice overly light. "You've been holding out on us, Ava." The old me might have withered under the thinly veiled condescension, but not anymore. "Not at all," I said calmly. "I've been exactly who I've always been. You just weren't paying attention." Before they could respond, Hailey stepped beside me, sliding an arm around my shoulders in full view of the nearby guests. "Everyone's been talking about Ava's speech and her awards," she said, her voice loud enough for nearby relatives to hear. "It's pretty amazing that she did all of this without a bit of support. Can you imagine how far she could have gone if she'd had the same advantages I did?" The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Our mother flinched, visibly shaken by the public call-out. Around us, Uncle Jack and several cousins exchanged glances, some surprised, some already forming judgments they hadn't considered before. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation at home," Dad said tightly, clearly uncomfortable. "Actually," I replied, "I have a celebration with my business team and mentors this afternoon. They've been the ones cheering for me these past 4 years. I wouldn't miss it for anything." Grandpa Joe stepped forward, his expression firm. "I'm coming with you," he said, taking my hand. "I want to meet the people who recognized what your own parents refused to see." The silence that followed was thick. For the first time, I saw something new in my mother's eyes: regret. Not enough to change things, but enough to make her realize something had been lost. "We're proud of you, of course," she said, voice wavering. Thank you, I replied with calm dignity. But today isn't about your approval. It's about celebrating a journey I made without it. As Grandpa Joe and I turned to leave, Hailey stepped away from our parents. I'm coming too, she said, voice steady. Together, we walked across campus, two sisters who had, in different ways, outgrown the weight of their parents' expectations. Behind us, our parents stood silently, their carefully crafted version of who their daughters were unraveling in real time. The celebration in the business school atrium was a world apart from that awkward farewell. Professor Bennett had coordinated a polished reception, complete with crystal punch bowls, fresh bouquets, and banners that read, "Congratulations to our outstanding graduates." Hailey looked around, wide-eyed. "This is so different from the political science reception," she whispered. "Everyone here actually seems to know each other." The business department became my home, I explained to Hailey as we walked through the atrium. These people really saw me, when our parents couldn't. Before she could respond, Zoe rushed over, nearly knocking over a tray of pastries as she enveloped me in a hug. Then, with her usual boldness, she turned to my grandmother and sister. "I've heard so much about both of you," she said warmly. The legendary grandmother who believed in Ava from the start, and the sister who finally woke up. Hailey blushed, but her laugh was genuine. "Better late than never?" Zoe winked. "Exactly." Moments later, Dean Rodriguez appeared, holding a tray of champagne flutes. To the woman of the hour, she beamed, handing glasses to each of us. "And this," she said, turning to my grandmother, "must be the incredible woman who saw Ava's brilliance from the beginning." Grandpa Joe chuckled, lifting his glass. "She didn't just see it, she fueled it." As they chatted, I glanced at Hailey, who stood quietly, watching the flow of people around me, professors, mentors, peers, all treating me not as someone who'd surprised them, but as someone they'd known would shine all along. The contrast with our parents' conditional recognition was impossible to miss. Then a confident voice called out from across the room. "Ms. Reynolds." A woman in a sleek navy pantsuit approached our group. "Jennifer Alexander, founder of Alexander Global Consulting. Your presentation at the competition was outstanding. We're thrilled you've accepted our offer." I shook her hand with gratitude. "Thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited to join your team." She smiled. "You've got exactly what we look for: intelligence, initiative, and the grit to make things happen. Not many new grads can say they've built a six-figure company before even finishing school." As she walked away to greet other guests, Hailey turned to me, wide-eyed. "You didn't tell me you were working for that Alexander Global. That's one of the most prestigious firms in the country." I shrugged modestly. "It happened quickly after the competition." She tilted her head. "The salary must be significant," I admitted, smiling. "More than Dad's, I'd guess." The celebration continued with heartfelt faculty speeches. Professor Bennett presented me with the Outstanding Entrepreneurship Award, her voice cracking as she spoke of my transformation from a determined freshman to a leader and role model. Throughout the afternoon, I introduced Grandpa Joe and Hailey to everyone, professors who had challenged me, classmates I had hired, university staff who had helped me with financial aid. Each introduction came with a personal story. "I had no idea," Hailey whispered after the 10th person. "Everyone here adores you." Midway through the event, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "The family is gathering at the rental house for dinner at 6. Please join us. We want to celebrate both our graduates." I showed it to Hailey and Grandpa Joe. "What do you think?" I asked. Grandpa snorted. "A bit late to play proud parents, don't you think?" Hailey hesitated. "They're trying, I guess. In their way." "We don't have to decide yet," I said, slipping the phone away. "Let's enjoy this first." As the reception wound down, Professor Bennett returned with a campus photographer. "The business magazine wants a photo of you with your family," she said. "Are they here?" I paused. "My grandmother and sister are," I said carefully. "My parents are elsewhere." Understanding flickered in her eyes. She nodded gently. "Then, let's take the photo with the people who showed up." "The family that matters is the one that supports you," Professor Bennett said gently, stepping aside so the photographer could position us. "Let's get a photo of you three." The photographer arranged us in front of the Rainier University School of Business emblem, Grandpa Joe in the middle, an arm around each of us, Hailey and I in our black robes, our tassels swaying in the breeze. My embroidered stole glinted softly under the sunlight, the words "Diamonds are made under pressure" shining proudly across my chest. As the reception wound down, Dean Rodriguez approached with a small, elegant business card in hand. "The Dean of Admissions for Rainier's MBA program asked me to give you this," she said with a smile. "They're very interested in offering you a full scholarship, should you decide to pursue your graduate degree while working." I blinked, stunned. "More doors are opening for you than your parents ever imagined," Grandpa Joe whispered. Walking with Zoe toward her car, I asked, "Should we even bother going to the family dinner?" Grandpa took my hand. "That decision is entirely yours, my dear. You owe them nothing." He paused thoughtfully. "But there might be value in letting them see exactly who you've become, not for their sake." "For yours." Hailey nodded. "Besides, I'd love to watch Uncle Jack corner them about why no one heard a word about your business until today." Decision made. We headed to the rental house where the extended family had gathered. Conversation faltered as we walked in, tension cutting through the air. Then came a flurry of congratulatory hugs and handshakes from cousins and aunts. Mom emerged from the kitchen, trying to regain her usual hostess charm, though her smile trembled. "Ava, you came," she said, arms awkwardly open. "We were just about to serve dinner." Dad swept in behind her, voice booming. "There's my successful daughters," he said with artificial cheer. "Ava, why didn't you tell us about this big consulting job?" The question was so audacious, I almost laughed. But before I could speak, Uncle Jack cut in with brutal precision. "Probably because you haven't asked about her plans even once in the last 4 years, Robert." The room went still. My father's face turned red, caught between embarrassment and anger. "We've always supported both our daughters," he said defensively. "Financially?" Aunt Susan chimed in sweetly. "Because the university president made it very clear Ava paid her own way while building a business." My mother tried to recover. "We had limited resources. We had to make hard decisions. Ava's always been so independent." "Independent by necessity, not by choice," Grandpa Joe said sharply. "Let's not rewrite history just because her success doesn't fit your narrative anymore." The air thickened. Some cousins shifted uncomfortably, others watched with unblinking interest. Then Hailey stepped forward, voice clear and even. "Mom, Dad, it's time to acknowledge the truth. You favored me. You poured everything into me and nothing into Ava. You underestimated her. And today, everyone saw just how wrong you were." My mother's eyes filled with tears. Whether from shame or regret, I couldn't quite tell. But the silence that followed felt like the first honest moment our family had shared in years. "We never meant to," my mother began, her voice thin with defensiveness. "Impact matters more than intent," I said calmly, not unkindly. "Your choices shaped my reality, regardless of what you meant to do." Dad, clearly uncomfortable with having his authority challenged so openly, tried to redirect. "This really isn't the time for airing family grievances. We're here to celebrate." "Yes," Aunt Susan chimed in, tone sharp. "We're celebrating Ava's extraordinary achievements, accomplished entirely without your support." Rather remarkable topic for a family gathering, wouldn't you say? The dinner continued with an undercurrent of tension. But something had shifted. Relatives who had once overlooked me now leaned in with genuine interest, asking questions about my business, my position at Alexander Global, my plans for the future. Every time I shared a milestone, I saw my parents flinch, the reality of what they'd ignored crashing down with each word. By dessert, the dynamics were unmistakably different. For as long as I could remember, my parents had been the gravity around which family gatherings orbited, their opinions final, their preferences quietly obeyed. But now their credibility had cracked. The daughter they once saw as second tier had risen above every expectation, while they had been exposed for the roles they hadn't played. When only immediate family remained, Dad cleared his throat. "Your mother and we've been talking," he said carefully. "And we'd like to help with the security deposit on an apartment near your new job. As a graduation gift." It was so small, a token gesture, when they had funded every comfort and opportunity for Hailey for years. Once, it might have meant everything to me. Now, it felt almost insulting. "Thank you," I replied evenly, "but that won't be necessary." I looked him directly in the eye. "My starting salary at Alexander Global is $90,000, plus performance bonuses. My housing is more than secure." The number landed like a blow. I saw it on his face, the realization that I was now out-earning him straight out of college. His expression flickered through surprise, discomfort, and finally, reluctant respect. "Well," he said, forcing a smile, "you've certainly proven yourself." "Yes," I said, voice steady. "I have. Not because I needed to prove anything to them, but because I had done it for myself." As we gathered our things, Hailey pulled me aside. "I'm staying with Grandpa Joe for a few days before I move into my apartment. Wanna come? Just us and the people who actually matter." The invitation was so gentle, yet so profound in its redefinition of what family meant. I felt emotion swell in my chest. "I'd love that," I whispered. And so we left, leaving our parents standing in the doorway of their rented celebration house, watching, uncertain, as the daughters they thought they understood walked away together. For years, I had chased their validation like sunlight through a locked window. But now I was choosing my own family: Grandpa Joe, Hailey, Zoe, my mentors, my supporters. They had seen my worth all along. And that recognition meant more than any apology that came too late to matter. The weeks following graduation were a whirlwind of new beginnings and long overdue resolution. I moved into a sunlit apartment in Capitol Hill, just a short walk from the Alexander Global Consulting offices. Using part of my business competition winnings, I covered the security deposit and furnished the space with a mix of sleek secondhand finds and pieces I'd long dreamed of owning. Meanwhile, my digital marketing agency kept running, now managed by my former student team, who were formally employed with fair wages and flexible schedules that respected their coursework. They didn't just work for me now, they were stakeholders in something we'd built together. In July, the magazine feature hit newsstands. The full-page spread showed the photo of me flanked by Grandpa Joe and Hailey, my stole proudly displayed, our faces glowing in that post-graduation light. The article chronicled my rise from self-financed freshman to award-winning entrepreneur and consulting hire, casting my journey as a testament to persistence and personal vision. I mailed copies to Professor Bennett, Dean Rodriguez, and everyone else who had walked beside me. Notably, I didn't send one to my parents. Our relationship, though no longer hostile, remained uncertain. 2 weeks post-graduation, they invited me to lunch at a quiet bistro on the edge of town. The meeting felt unfamiliar. No smugness, no condescension. Just discomfort and something that might have been humility. "We've done a lot of thinking," my mom began, stirring her iced tea more than drinking it. "About the choices we made. The assumptions we lived by." My father, never at ease with emotional introspection, added stiffly, "We may have misjudged your potential." I nearly laughed. The understatement was staggering, but I let it pass. I'd learned to recognize when small steps were significant. "Yes," I said simply. "You did." Mom swallowed hard. "We'd like to try to repair things. If you're willing." I thought about it, about the child in me who'd once cried herself to sleep over their silence, who would have given anything for their praise. That girl wanted to reject them outright. But the woman I had become knew better. "I'm open," I said, "but this would have to be a new relationship. Built on who I am, not who you hoped I'd be. And it requires acknowledging that what happened wasn't a miscommunication. It was favoritism. And it hurt me." They exchanged a long look. Then my mother nodded slowly. "We did favor Hailey," she admitted. "She fit the mold we recognized. And we were wrong." "I'm truly sorry, Ava. It wasn't perfect. But it was real." That was enough to begin. Over the summer, I started my consulting position, diving into high-impact strategy projects and gradually finding a rhythm between professional demands and personal healing. I stayed close with Hailey and Grandpa Joe, weekly sister dinners, weekend brunches, and spontaneous late-night calls about everything from work to family legacy. Hailey had landed a job with a nonprofit focused on educational equity, a role that seemed born from her awakening to the privilege she'd once worn unconsciously. "I keep thinking about how different our starting lines were," she said one night over Thai takeout. "And how many people never get a chance to catch up, no matter how hard they run." Her words meant more than any apology. My sister wasn't just growing, she was transforming. By the time autumn arrived, I had fully settled into life after college, thriving at Alexander Global, mentoring my student-run agency, and finally, living life on my own terms. My first performance review at Alexander Global exceeded every expectation. The senior partners praised my strategic thinking, my ability to navigate complex client needs, and my early leadership in team projects. Along with their recognition came something unexpected, a generous performance bonus. Financial security, that long-distant dream I had chased through late nights and student loan calculators, was finally mine. That weekend, I visited Grandpa Joe's lake cabin in the Cascades. We sat on the porch, sipping tea as the sun dipped below the treeline. At some point, he disappeared inside and returned with a small, time-worn wooden box. "I've been saving this," he said softly, "for the right moment." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, cool and light in my hand. "This belonged to my grandmother," he said. "She gave it to me to pass down when the time was right. She used to say a woman's worth comes from within, not from what others decide she's worth." I always imagined I'd give it to a granddaughter who understood what that meant. He fastened it around my wrist with gentle fingers. "Your path was harder than it should have been, Ava. But the woman you've become, because of that path, is extraordinary." His words struck something deep in me. For so long, I'd wrestled with the injustice of it all, the inequity, the exclusion, the ache of being unseen. But sitting there, watching the sun dance on the water, I realized something. What had nearly broken me had also built me. A year after graduation, I used a portion of my savings and business profits to create the first-generation achievement scholarship at Rainier University. Unlike typical merit-based awards, this fund focused on students who had overcome substantial family, financial, or systemic barriers. When selecting recipients, I told the committee, consider not just where these students are, but how far they had to climb to get there. The first scholarship recipient was a young woman balancing 2 part-time jobs, accounting coursework, and the care of 2 younger siblings. In her, I saw a version of myself, but this time, with a support system I had once only dreamed of. My parents attended the scholarship launch event, another step in the slow, careful rebuild of our relationship. As I spoke about creating ladders for others, I caught a look on my father's face I had never seen before. Not the forced smile of appearances, not the awkward regret, but genuine, unconditional pride. "You've built something meaningful," he said afterward, his voice quiet. Mom added, more openly, "You've turned your pain into something with purpose." That's rare. Their words mattered, but not in the way they once would have. Because I had already proven everything I needed to myself. My bond with Hailey deepened too. The old competitiveness faded, replaced by shared purpose and mutual respect. During a Saturday hike through Mt. Rainier National Park, she asked, "Do you think you'll ever fully forgive them?" We paused at a lookout, the valley stretching below us. "Forgiveness isn't a one-time decision," I said thoughtfully. "It's a process of letting go of the hope that the past could have been different." I glanced at her. "I don't think I'll ever forget being told I wasn't worth investing in. But I'm learning not to carry it anymore. But I'm working on not letting that moment define my relationship with them going forward," I told Hailey quietly. "That's the forgiveness I'm capable of right now." She nodded, thoughtful. For what it's worth, their greatest loss was never really knowing who you were all those years. We stood in silence at the overlook, the wind brushing softly through the evergreens, the city far in the distance. I thought about the journey that had brought me to this place, emotionally, professionally, spiritually. From the teenager crushed by the words, "She deserved it. You didn't," to the woman who now created opportunity for others, who knew her worth and no longer sought approval from those too limited to give it. The real victory wasn't in proving my parents wrong, though I'd be lying if I said that didn't feel good. The deeper triumph was realizing they had never defined me to begin with. I had always been capable, always worthy. Their inability to see that wasn't a reflection of my shortcomings, it was a reflection of theirs. And perhaps the most powerful truth for anyone who's ever been dismissed or underestimated is this: your value exists, even if others fail to recognize it. In the end, being overlooked became my greatest advantage. It forced me to grow resilience, discipline, and belief in myself, qualities that shaped the very success they couldn't imagine for me. So, have you ever been underestimated by someone whose opinion once defined your sense of worth? How did you find your strength, your voice? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this message resonated with you. Remember, sometimes those who doubt you the most are the reason you fly highest. Thank you for walking this path with me. You are already enough.